let me make sure that I've got chat over here and Discord so I can see. Hey, it's working. Yay! I see me, I see Grace, and I see James one over.
Woo!
Yay!
Awesome. Sweet. And we are all employees of MCDM. That's awesome. This is great. I love how the company is growing. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It is the regular 11 o'clock stream. Thanks to Jerry for getting the stuff worked out. I am joined by Grace Chueng, who is one of our full-time staff artists. And actually, Grace, I think you were the first person we hired outside our own professional network. So that's super exciting for us. And James, the managing editor of Arcadia, the person responsible for bringing all these people together and making dope content. Jared says, Grace, your art is amazing. Of course, I agree. We're talking about issue 2 of Arcadia. And we thought it would be fun to start with talking about art, and also I wanted to put Grace on stream because she's been working for us now for, what is it, Grace? Is it a year?
Almost, not quite. I think I joined in April. So
okay, so we're coming up on a year, and you folks have never got to meet or hang out with Grace. So I thought it would be a good idea if we did that. And what I would like to do, if it's okay with James, is I'm going to shut up now. And James is going to be the interviewer. This is how we did stuff last week, and it worked. And I'm just going to watch you folks. I'm going to watch chat. And then if you guys have questions, I will relay them to James. So I hope that sounds good. Okay, good. James, Grace, take it away.
All right. So, Grace, I'm hoping that, we're going to dive into, obviously, Arcadia. You had created the art for the elementals in this issue, the periodic table of elementals. But before we get into there, I'm hoping you can sort of just take me back on a little bit of a journey through how you got to MCDM. Where did you start professionally, and how did you make your way here to MCDM?
So prior to working at MCDM, I actually worked for Hasbro as a sculptor, which is kind of unusual because I actually majored in illustration. But due to just some stuff happening, I worked in sculpting first. And then afterwards, I did a little bit of 2D contract work with a mobile game company, which helped me find another job that was also 2D art based, which is with a studio in Redmond. And then after that, just after I've collected a little bit of experience doing both 2D and 3D stuff, I switched over to MCDM. And that was super exciting for me because that's like the first time I've been able to do both like illustration and 3D work, which is kind of hard. It's hard to find a job where you can do both things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's hard to find a person who does both. Matt has said on stream a couple times that one reason that you were sort of like a needle in a haystack with respect to your talents and your experience is because, you could do everything that they wanted you to be able to do, that Jason and Matt were looking for. So why don't you tell us, what is it that you do here at MCDM?
So I guess I kind of do a little bit of everything, but I guess when I first started at MCM, it was mainly working on sculpting things because we were sort of at the tail end of doing the minis, and so I sculpted a bunch of the minis for the Undead Court because that's sort of where I hopped in at that point, and I also did a little bit of prepping stuff for Trenchworks and 3D printing, in addition to doing all of the turntables and the renders for the minis on the store. And then afterwards, I did illustration work on the Illrigger and then Arcadia, and now I'm primarily working on illustrations for Kingdoms and Warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. And your work in Arcadia is stellar. It's really incredible. And it was actually some of the first art, because you're part of the MCDM staff, right? Some of the first art we saw, and it was like, oh, well, everything needs to now measure up to Grace's Elementals in terms of quality and awesomeness. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the process for creating these Elementals, especially in this article, right? There are 4 different elementals, and I would say they're very different. Like one is sort of rocky and stony, one is more this beautiful metallic thing, one is sort of made of almost electric energy, and then the last one is like a gas-based, partially invisible form. So it really ran the gamut and tested sort of your skills and what you were able to do. So what was that process like for creating the elementals?
I mean, in general, like my general process is usually I first start by doing sketches and thumbnails for the work, and then I go and I run them by Jason. And after I run them by Jason, a lot of times I'll also run the sketches by people at the company. And then once we sort of have a bit of back and forth, we get a little more specific about the design. And once the design is worked out, I usually start to do a tighter line drawing of everything, and then I block in like all the colors and stuff, and then I refine it, and then we get the final illustration. As for like the process of coming up with the specific elementals, that was pretty interesting because never really done anything like that before, and these elementals were like pretty cool because they're really different from something that's more obvious like a fire or water elemental, which is like, it's kind of obvious what they do. One's made of fire and one's made of water, but this one's like one's made of lightning and one is like explosive metal, another one is like conductive metal, and another one is just like an amorphous gas cloud. And I personally thought the one that was like the Noxa was the most difficult to do, just because it was an invisible amorphous gas cloud. And I was just like, what is this? What could this possibly be? And I was like running through a bunch of things. I was like, maybe a ghost, maybe it's literally just a fog cloud, but that's kind of boring. And then, after like talking back and forth with Jason and stuff like that, I got some ideas about it by just randomly searching for images on Google, and I ran into stuff that was like, I was thinking like neon gas, so I was like neon colors, maybe oil slicks, bubbles. Those are neon colors that are sort of transparent, and I sort of just went down that rabbit hole, and I was just messing around with all these different patterns, and eventually I decided to do like a pattern where it's mirrored, and I was like, oh, this kind of looks like a butterfly. Maybe it's like a butterfly. It's kind of weird, and I'm gonna run it by everyone and see if they like it. And it turns out everybody did, so that's what it ended up being. And I'm really excited that I got to do that because it was sort of in my opinion, I thought it was like a different take on what could have been just like a transparent fart cloud. But I think a butterfly is way cooler.
A butterfly is cooler
Yeah,
than a
looks way
transparent
better.
fart cloud.
Yeah, I think it's
But the butterfly's
it
way
really was
better.
Yeah, it's such a real kind of elevation of the concept, I think, and it helps bring to life. Elementals are really hard, I think, for GMs because you have to describe amorphous fart clouds as something that their players should fear and not laugh at, right? Or something powerful, or something that that is working with them as an ally, right? So there's all these different sort of things, and I think the real raw energy of all of these things really comes across in a very, very cool way. So is there anything that you found, obviously other than the Noxa, which sounds like it was the most challenging elemental to create, like what did you really enjoy about this, and was there anything else that you found challenging?
Well, my personal favorite elemental was probably the Conducere, just because it's really pretty and it's shiny, and its description just says it's really pretty and shiny. But I think I personally really enjoyed working with Jason on through the process of this, because I feel like at MCDM a lot of the times what happens is I'll get the prompt and then I'll go off and I'll think of some ideas and I'll just dump it into the channel and be like, hey guys, can you look at this? And then you'll get someone that hops on and goes, what if you did this? This is really cool, but what if we add this? And I'll be like, wait, what if we did this? And it just sort of builds like that, and everyone gets more and more excited, and we just go, oh my God, that's so good, oh my God. And at the end, you're just like, yes, this is perfect. All right, I can do this now. And I just we just have really good synergy. And I think I had that with a lot of these, when I was talking with Jason, he would just be like, but what if you did this? And what if you added that? And eventually, we come up with something that I would have not have thought of on my own. But thanks to everybody else pitching in, it's become like all these little parts coming together become like a much greater whole. And
Yeah.
for the condes- hmm?
Oh no, go
for the
ahead. Go ahead.
consistory, oh sorry, yeah. For the consistory, I personally really enjoyed it because I liked its personality. Like it's sort of passive, and it's like the nice one that won't punch you to death or suffocate you or electrocute you. And I just sort of thought it would be like a shiny version of Bastion with more birds. So that's why I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
It was shiny. It's nice. It doesn't want to kill you like the other one.
Yeah, it really gets this idea across. The fact that you have these very beautiful birds kind of landing on it, and it, this giant hulking metal but beautiful creature, right? Handling them, it's just such a nice picture that really gets across that like this is very different from the one that looks like living lightning, right? In a fun way. So for you, elementals, because they can be anything, right? You talked about like the fire and the water elemental. They don't really have like a fixed form necessarily. What was it like to think up the form and appearance of different creatures like elementals that could be anything?
I mean, some of them were a bit harder, but some of them were also easier. I think for the most part, what I did was I read the description. I tried to find something in nature that matched. Like for the Kamburo, since it was like an explosive metallic thing, I was like both me and Jason went online and we looked up images of like metal that had been shot through with bullets or something like that because it sort of gives off that explosive vibe. And then there's like, volcanoes are explosive. So maybe we just combine the two things and we'll get an exploding, angry volcano man. And then others for me were like super easy. Like for the Electron, I immediately had an idea for that one. There's like something called red sprites or blue sprites, which is a type of high altitude lightning. And it kind of looks like a person. And that was basically the first thing I thought of when I was coming up with ideas for it. And I just did a bunch of thumbnails that were sort of based off of that actual real life phenomenon. That was like probably the fastest one for me.
Oh, that's awesome because it really does look like living lightning in person form. It looks terrifying, the Electron. Well, thank you for talking with me and answering all my questions. I'm sure chat probably has a bundle of questions they want to ask as well. Matt, what's chat want to know?
Yeah, it's so first of all, people in chat are just blown away by Grace's art. We've linked now to her art station. And people are like, my God, this stuff is amazing. So people love your art, Grace. And I want to second James's earlier statement about how, like, when Grace, when we were looking for a full-time artist, Jason Hasenauer is our art director. He, in some ways, he is a full-time artist, but his job is really managing getting all the art done. And that involves some drawing, and he also handles a lot of the miniature stuff. But I was like, man, we need another artist. We need a full-time artist. And so we said, let's just put out the word. And we got hundreds of people applying. And there were people who were applying. I'm like, oh, this person looks good. This is me I'm a writer, right? I'm like, oh, wow, this person looks good. And then Jason would come over and go, I mean, I guess. And I'd be like, oh, I guess this person is not good. Right. And then we were starting to actually despair, like that this process wasn't going to work. And we were going to need to hire a headhunter, like a professional, like recruiter, which, I've used before in video games. And then all of a sudden, like in the middle of the night, Jason messages me and goes, oh my God. and starts sending me pictures from Grace. And like, we found a unicorn. So, and then we had a process. This gets into one of the questions people were asking. We had a process that we imagined would go like, okay, well, Jason will talk to her via email and do like a written test. And then if that goes well, call her on the phone, talk to her on the phone. And then if that goes well, we'll bring her out here. And so Jason's handling this process and I'm checking in every once in a while to see how it's going. And he does the phone call with Grace. And then he messages me and goes, we don't need to bring her in. We should just hire her. Which turned out to be good because that was the pandemic. That was like, we literally, do you remember this, Grace? Of course you do.
I was always going to come down and then it was just like, oh, JK, no, you can't. No flights allowed.
JK. Yep, no flights allowed. Yeah, that was like literally that week that you were supposed to fly down. We had a hotel booked and everything. And that was when Seattle, which is near where you were then, kind of that's when the COVID-19 started to break out in America. And we were like, is this a good idea? And so if that was one of the questions somebody had, let's see if I can find who the person was. It was Charles Feuerbach said, how does Grace feel about being fully remote? Is it weird having never met the team in person?
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because when I first started, I did 1 year in-house with Hasbro, and then afterwards, I was basically like a contractor. So this is kind of just like me going right back to doing what I was doing before. So it's not really any different. Although I really would like to actually see the MCDM office since I've never actually been there. I've only seen videos like everybody else online. And I'm sad I can't go there and look at all the cool stuff on your shelf.
We are also sad, and we look forward to getting you out here once the pandemic has revived. Adam McLaughlin asked if Grace is an illustrator and can 3D model stuff, are we going to see Arcadia minis? And my question for Grace is, you've done an awful lot of art and you've seen a lot of art that these folks haven't seen. Is there anything in particular that you think would make a great mini that these people haven't seen or that have seen?
Oh man, like, geez, like the angels for, oh my God, from the last article, like Anahita, like those guys, oh my God, that would be amazing. It would also be like the craziest mini ever. And Jason might go. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we like coming up with
like crazy one.
We like illustrating things that make Jason's hat flip over his head when he tries to think about how we're going to turn it into a mini.
Actually, I think it's more like Trenchworks. I feel like Trenchworks would be like, Grace, please stop.
Grace, please
go away.
Benjamin Appel asks if you are a nerd, if you play tabletop games, and if so, how did you get into the hobby?
Actually, that's like super interesting because like in the beginning, I definitely started D&D super late. Like I didn't play it when I was younger in elementary school or high school or any of that. Oh, sorry. And sorry. But I actually started after college when one of my friends at Hasbro was like, "Hey, Grace, you seem like you'd like to play D&D. Do you want to join in my game?" And I was like, what is this thing? And they're like, it's D&D. Just come to my house and play it. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. And I made a character, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, I guess I think my character will die in one session, and this will probably be it. And clearly that didn't happen. And 3 years later, I was still playing the same character. And then I started like drawing art of the character and doing minis of that character, and here I am at MCDM doing more stuff for D&D. So it was like a rabbit hole that I kind of got dragged down by my friends, and boy, am I glad for it. Like I can't thank them enough. It's been really fun.
What do you think that coworker saw in you that made them think Grace would like D&D?
We all worked at Hasbro, and we all really liked similar things. We're just like, oh yeah, like I love drawing dragons. Oh my God, you draw dragons. It's like, and we love, Marvel and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. And we're all just sitting in the same office. And every day, like that coworker would just bring in like some really cool, like minis and action figures. And I'd be like, wait, what is that from? She'd be like, oh yeah, this is a Spawn action figure. And I'm like, oh, what is that? And then she'd bring in like another one, and be like, oh, this is a D&D Golden Dragon mini. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. What is this D&D thing that you all speak of that I never heard? And eventually she was just like, I don't know how you can like not know about this D&D thing. I'm just gonna make
good question.
And you're gonna enjoy it.
So I have a question. When you're at Hasbro, are there people, are there illustrators and modelers and whatnot who aren't nerds, that it's just a job and they'd be perfectly happy drawing birds and volcanoes, but here they are at Hasbro drawing nerd stuff?
I'm sure there are, but I think most of the ones that I've met, since for me, like the school that I went to, Ringling, we had a program with Hasbro, so a lot of the students that went there were actually my classmates or people from like a year above me or a year below me. and pretty much everyone that went there was kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone wasn't a nerd, they were doing a very good job of hiding it.
Yeah. I don't know many artists who aren't nerds in some way, but I guess everybody's a nerd about something.
These days, yeah. Kenan Brown asks, what is your favorite thing to have drawn so far at MCDM and why? Or what's your favorite project is what he asked, or what they asked.
For me, I personally really liked all the Illrigger stuff that I did because that's just right up my alley. It's just like people with swords and armor, and every time, like it's really easy just to make me happy. Just go person holding sword, wearing armor, probably wearing red and black. Congratulations, you have an Illrigger. I'm instantly happy.
Yeah, I can't wait for people to see
to be all those things together.
I can't wait for people to see. There's a lot of that. Like Grace, I believe you did all the art for the final Illrigger, correct?
Yeah, I think so. It's just
people are going to be blown away when they see it.
Yeah. Ooh, it's great.
A lot of people in chat, when you said that one of the elementals was inspired by Bastion, including Pesto, one of our mods, said Bastion, I knew it. So a whole bunch of people recognized that reference. And Aaron Pangillan Aaron asks, hey, everybody, what is the art? You talked a little bit about this. What is the art approval process like for you? Like when you put something in the Discord, I guess that's the first step people should know is that we generally see Grace's art in Discord where she goes, hey, here's what I'm working on.
I feel like it's pretty similar for like everywhere I've been at. Most of the time it's like you start with just like a general idea, some sketches, just like spitball and see how everyone else feels about it. And then usually like people will tend to gravitate towards one, or Jason will be like, this is the one I like, you should do it. And then I'll take that idea and it goes like I refine it. Like after we pick out, like the hardest part of it is usually the thumbnail, because that's when you're trying to like nail down the idea, and it has to like read immediately, and it has to be like obvious what the story is, or like it should tell you what the article wants, like is about, And once that's nailed down, I usually do something that's a little more refined, like a sketch or like part of a sketch or something, and I'll send it back to Jason. Basically, I just plop it into the Discord and I tag Jason, and anybody else who feels like commenting can like hop on there and comment. Like usually Nick will help out and comment as well. And it kind of just like goes back and forth until it gets about to like the rendering stage. At that point, I just like, because I already know what this is going to be about, I just sort of put in all the colors and I start rendering out all the materials and making it like look 3D and realistic. And it goes like back and forth as well. Like I'll show like some like progress basically, but usually there's not a whole lot of commenting at that stage since everything's nailed down. And once I'm done, I just like post the final thing, and I'm just like, let me know if there's any changes I need to make. And if there are no changes, then it's done for real.
Adam McLaughlin asks, this could be a thorny question, so that's why I like it. Who at MCDM is the harshest person for art feedback in the Discord?
Everybody's actually really nice about it. So I would say nobody's really harsh at all. Like it's been really great. I feel like a lot of times for me when I do art, it's just like, I'm just like, ooh, I should probably change that.
Do you ever? So here's a question, and this I think is going to be super informative for people because it is very high level. Do you ever feel like when I give you feedback, me personally, give you feedback, do you ever feel like, wait, is this the boss telling me I need to do this, or am I free to ignore this? Because I'm unlike Jason and Nick, I'm not an artist, and I often think, I don't know if my feedback even makes any sense. I hope Grace knows to ignore this. Is there any conflict in your mind about like, this is a bad idea? Should I tell Matt to go screw?
A lot of times, what I try to do, like, I don't ever really ignore anything you guys say. Like, I want to hear what your opinions are because I think it's important, and it's good to like get a different perspective on anything. Because sometimes it's like someone will bring up something, it might be completely contrary to what I thought of before, but like once I stop and I think about it, there could be a point. Like you have to think about like what point the other person was making. Like maybe there is something that I could do to like emphasize that. Like maybe they don't mean like throw your piece out the window or something. Like you guys have never said that, but like nobody ever means like throw your piece out the window. It's usually just like, what if there's this other aspect of it that you need to consider? But ultimately, a lot of times it comes down to Jason's decision. I usually default to what Jason says because he's the art director and he
Yep.
ultimately gets to say, like, this is what I think exemplifies this problem that we need to solve by doing this art in this way to show this thing for this article or something like that.
We have another guest standing by, but I want to postpone that for just 1 minute because I think a good illustration of this that'll help people understand the process and the way I think as a manager is the pirate piece that you pitched to us. But this is for the Mercantile Guild illustration for Kingdoms and Warfare, and one of the subtypes of a Mercantile Guild is you can be a bunch of pirates, and you did this amazing illustration that showed like the pirate king boarding a ship from the point of view of somebody watching the pirate king come at them. So the pirate king was front and center and like pointing a gun and stuff. And I looked at that and I was like, I feel like I've seen this piece a bunch. What if and I had an idea for how to make it more cinematic and more widescreen and show more members of this pirate crew boarding a ship. But I didn't know if it was okay for me to say that. So I went to Jason offline and I said, this is what I think about this, but I don't know. This is a big redirect. This means the whole thumbnail that you were drawing, the whole sketch we're gonna like rotate it around and completely change the perspective and add a bunch of characters. Is this a reasonable thing for me to say? And Jason's like, I think you should just tell that to Grace and see what she says. And I was like, okay. And now we have an amazing piece of pirates boarding an enemy ship that looks awesome. It's got all sorts of, there's like lizard men and stuff running around, and there's like a half orc getting shot with a gun. There's all sorts of people are going to love it.
Yeah.
So that's the process here on our end. Is the thing that makes me happy about this is that Grace is the artist. Grace starts with ideas, and but Jason has, not me. Jason Hasenauer is the ultimate say because he's the art director. That's the thing I want to avoid. I want to avoid a scenario where the folks who work here don't know who they should listen to, right? Because that's the when you're open and like Grace puts stuff in the Discord and everyone reacts to it. And my concern is that people aren't going to know, well, do I have to synthesize all this feedback? Can I ignore people if it's not a good idea? Anyway, blah blah.
Yeah. It's part of that is I do feel like there are very clearly delineated lines in like whose call is what. And Matt, you do a very good job. As the MC, you could easily say whatever I say is law, but you often say like, this is what I think. But remember, Jason is the one who makes the final call about art and that kind of thing. And that really helps with flow. It's great.
That or Jason will hop in and be like, you should do this. This is what you should do.
Yeah, I would say it's Jason is the person at MCDM that you interface with the most, I would say. Is that not right?
Yeah, definitely.
How many
Thank you, Grace.
of chickens do you get, Grace? What's your chicken picture ratio?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah, right.
Jason said we're chickens.
Jason's,
really like chickens.
I love that there are tens of thousands of people now, thanks to YouTube, who only know Jason Hasenauer as the guy behind the chicken. That's delightful. More chickens, Jason. Grace, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, let me check in. Hopefully, we're ready for our next guest.
Yes, we are ready.
Joshua is ready. Jerry says, fantastic. So whenever you're ready, Jerry, take it away. Thank you very much, Grace. Everybody say bye to Grace. We will see her again, I'm sure, on some future stream.
Bye. Thanks, Grace. And it worked. Hello,
hey.
Joshua. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. So Joshua is here, and Joshua, you also go by Paladin, I should mention. In fact, I believe prefer Paladin. So if you hear me calling Josh Paladin, that's who it is.
That's awesome. Paladins are my favorite.
Hey, same. Yeah, I started as an online handle, and now all my friends think it's weird to call me Josh. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, no, don't be. It's fine.
The Skype calls are all about interrupting.
Valid.
So Paladin, you wrote our subclasses of the seasons article, and I definitely want to dive deep into subclasses of the seasons with you. I had a blast working with you on this and seeing all the subclasses you created. But first, take me back to your journey into the RPG industry. I know you've answered this a bunch on interviews and stuff, but please let me know, like, how did you get started? Because it was basically you had a unique way in that you started by leading a project. I feel like was your first step into the RPG industry.
Yeah. So like in May of 2019, a person online by the name of Sirasor was like, "Hey, I know you're Filipino. I know you do graphic design. I need a graphic designer for my book project." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I could use a few bucks." And then it dominated my life for the past since then up until like now, honestly. Up until a few weeks ago, it's been the dominant thing in my life. But yeah, that was my introduction to the industry, went to some conventions, and then about a year later, I became a full-time TTRPG creator. And my first big thing has been being as the co-director for this 300-plus page book.
Wow.
Yeah, and tell people about that book because I think it's really awesome. And it should also be noted that Mackenzie de Armas, who is the author of the periodic table of elementals, is also a big part of the project that you worked on.
Yeah, so the book I worked on was The Islands of Sina Una, which is a book for 5th edition D&D based on pre-colonial Filipino culture and mythology, which, if you'd ever heard anything about Filipino mythology before, don't worry, neither did I up until I started working on this book. I talk about sometimes how hard the research is for the book, but like my biggest example is it took me a month to find the actual notation wording for one specific thing we used in the book. And that was for like one bit of information in like, I showed up on like 4 pages, I think, in a 300-page book. Really hard stuff to research.
Yeah.
And at the time I happened to be living in Chicago, and they had one of 3 North American copies of a book we needed for some research on a subclass. So, you know, it gets very intense for the research. Everything I do going forward seems a little less intense now.
Yeah.
But I met Mackenzie at PAX 2019, and about a month later, I was like, "Hey, I like your stuff. Do you want to be lead writer?" And then she said yes, and that's how I trapped her into working on the book with me.
Wow. Incredible.
You met her? Did you say you met her at a convention?
Yeah, at PAX 2019, PAX U 2019.
That's I interrupt and I bring that up because we often get people asking, "Hey, how do I write for Arcadia?" And then we say, "Well, you basically have to become known as a professional in the business." And they're like, "Okay, how do I do that?" And one component of that, and it's real, like freelancers and people who want to do this should, if they can, try to get to conventions, because networking at conventions is a big deal. There's only so much you can do, you know, on Twitter. Face-to-face networking at conventions is huge.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. There's a lot of noise online, I feel, and getting your face known, getting someone to know like how you act and how you hold yourself is really critical to sometimes getting a job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's Josh. You and I met at a convention. That's how we first interacted.
Yeah, I made the joke online about like, you know, I don't like how people only call you Mr. Intricasso in a negative tone. So if I see you in person at a convention, I'm going to say Mr. Intricasso in a very positive tone. And then like you were leaving a panel and said, "Hey, Mr. Intricasso," and you were like, "What? What, are you that guy online?"
Are you that guy online?
It's true. I am generally only spoken down to about how my ideas are inferior when and someone uses the name Mr. Intricasso. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk, obviously, about your subclasses of the season. And your subclasses for this, I really want to delve into this because people have commented on, and this was something you and I talked about at the beginning, how it's not just, it's not like, oh, the summer class is all about fire and the winter class is all about dealing cold damage and that sort of thing. These are some specific aspects of each season that you have sort of glommed onto. And I want to talk a little bit about how what was your process for discovering each different part of the season? Like the wizard is all about hibernation, and that comes from winter. I learned a lot about hunting, which I did not know about before, and that's like that autumn is a big season to go hunt, right? And that's why our warlock patron is the horned one and associated with hunting. Child of the sun for the summer, and then all about rain and storms for the bard, College of Springtide. So if you could talk a little bit about kind of each one and how you determined that specific aspect of the season that you wanted to use, that would be great.
Sure. So for springtide and summer, like it comes largely from being in an elementary school, where summertime I would go absolutely ham wild at the daycare center I got dropped off at with the other kids, and it just felt very energetic and frenetic. During spring, it just felt like I was being, what's the word I want to use? Like I'd be in class writing stuff down, and I just want to be outside doing stuff because I knew summer was around the corner. I knew it was gone, but we couldn't really do a whole lot of stuff because of mud. So it just felt like I was like ready to go. I'm ready to go. I want to go right now, and just kind of being ready to start doing stuff. Autumn came from just learning about just the fall season and hunting, but also just like during fall, I feel like we're always on a countdown timer until it becomes inhospitable for us to be outside long term. And then, strange enough, the winter thing came from a line that the rapper Childish Gambino said about a winter album. He made an album during Christmas, released during Christmas, and he said that he didn't want to make it a Christmas album. His record wanted him to make, the Christmas album was coming around towards, Christmas time, but winter time is when all these college students go home for the season, and they spend a lot of time by themselves and thinking a lot, resting up for the next, semester. And I really wanted to capture that kind of vibe to it, just having to be thinking and resting for the things to come.
Yeah, I think it's really well done, and a big part of this was the playtesters banging too on these subclasses and stuff, and then you responding to the playtester feedback and bringing that back in and wrapping that in. So I mean, our playtesters are truly incredible for the stuff that they do for MCDM, and I thought you really synergized their feedback in some great ways. How did you find working with the playtesters on these subclasses, which I think are one of the trickiest elements of the game to really balance well?
Working with the playtesters was honestly really good. I'm a very esoteric person at heart. My mechanics are sometimes not as better defined as other designers. So when someone plays my stuff and gets to live through what I actually write down, that is a more lived-in experience than I have had. It's kind of like when you watch a TV show and using Yu-Gi-Oh as the go-to example, but the worst example possible. Like when the creator of the card game faces a guy who's really good at the card game, the guy who's really good at the card game does better.
Right. Yeah. That I feel like that makes sense, right? And our playtesters, it almost feels like they're weaponized because they have such sort of sharp attitudes and such a good knowledge about the game. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Horned One specifically. So I've seen the Horned One get a lot of love online. I've seen it get all sorts of hooray call outs and stuff. And also some wow, I didn't think a warlock could do this, right? I think the traps are one thing that people are surprised but about the class. I think people like the fact that you can turn your Eldritch Blast into an arrow and fire it from your bow and that kind of thing. So when you were working on the warlock, what sort of research did you do about hunting and going into the hunt and that sort of thing, especially and what did you want to play? Because it's not just hunting, it's also, you can also find this patron by being hunted, right? It's kind of you can both be prey and predator with this class.
Originally it started out as me wanting to have a more narrative focused subclass, because a lot of base 5e subclasses are very generic on purpose, so that you can kind of approach them in however you want your character to be. But I wanted something just a little more narratively focused, just to have that kind of a dolphin jumps out of the water, but it's more impressive when the dolphin jumps through a hoop, kind of the deal. And for research, it was primarily just learning when people hunted in the past, generally around fall, because that's like when things are good to like rest up, they're kind of slower, they're kind of more fed, and just after they've had their mating season, so there's already new ones on the way. But also just like you have to be kind of careful with over hunting in a certain population, otherwise the population of an animal won't be able to sustain itself.
Yeah. So you are yourself an artist as well as a game designer. What did you think of the art that went along with your article? And you and I have already talked about Faisal's art that accompanies your article, which I think. Go ahead, take it away. I'll let you comment.
I'm so grateful that they did the art for my stuff. I'm just really incredibly grateful. My roommate is actually Mackenzie, and when she and I got the PDF, we were looking at it, going, "This is really my vibe. This is really my aesthetic. It matches my esotericism very, very well." So much so that I did a thing I normally don't do, and hopped on Twitter and messaged them, going like, "I'm so glad you did the art for my subclasses. This is really amazing." And they responded with, "I'm so glad you like it." And
that's awesome.
I seriously go back and look at it, and I'm just so glad that I have such evocative pieces that aren't just the strict kind of digital illustration vibe we see a lot in Magic the Gathering and a lot of D&D books. It's more cinematic, more art focused. Right now, the Warlock art is my phone wallpaper. That's how much I really, really love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was funny when after we had sent out the preview PDFs, I got a message from you, and the preview image of the message was the art for my article is ... and I was like, oh boy. But I figured that based on how I had reacted to the art, I figured it would be positive, and I was correct when I opened it up, and I was like, oh, good. This is really, really great. So do you have a favorite of these subclasses? Do you have, other than art-wise, obviously, do you have one subclass that you like or that you're eager to play among these?
Horned Hunter, if only because that's been rattling around in my brain rent-free for the past, 2 years.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wanted to do this for a while, but I just didn't have a place to really put it. And I could have put it on DM's Guild, but also I didn't have the money to pay for an artist for it, so it was maybe not right now. And Child of the Sun Bloodline, just because that was such a difficult subclass to do, that I really want to see how it actually plays in the game.
Why was it difficult to do?
Yeah.
Sorcerers are a nightmare.
Oh. Nightmare sorcerer. That sounds... Go ahead.
Excuse me while I write that down. Just between sorcery points, metamagic options, and spells, which are a cavalcade of horrors by themselves, it's sometimes really difficult to make anything for such a very flexible and very powerhouse-hungry class. Even a base sorcerer can really wreck a world. Adding in a subclass, even a non-wild magic subclass, is difficult to balance out.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that we were doing, and that's why the sorcerer has abilities like Sunlit Path that give it some movement options and some overland travel options and things like that. But these subclasses aren't. Like all subclasses, aren't just about sort of the combat and that kind of thing. But I really liked your attention to what is the key feature here in some of these, and how can we make that cooler, right? Like the Wizard of Hibernations, that's all about hit dice and using hit dice as a resource in a different way than we normally see it. Which I think is a great option for wizards to have. So yeah, it's been really good. So what do you think then, as far as questions go, Matt? What do people out there have for Josh?
Well, we got a lot of really good questions. First of all, people want to know, is Sina Una out, and where can they get it?
Yeah, Sina Una PDF is currently on the Deck of Many's website. It is currently available, and hardcover will be on the way. We
Hardcover
had
on the
some
way.
issues. Yeah, we had some issues with print copies because like we had to get in touch with some artists, and the world's on fire.
That's true. It is, and or the opposite in some places. What?
Yep. Oh.
What hopefully we can get. I'm hoping desperately that some mod can find a link to the store where they can get the PDF, because a big part of why we do this is we want to help promote. Thank you very much. I knew I could rely on you, Duroc. John has linked to it, and if I'm smart, I will grab that link and put it in this video's description so people can get access to your work, because a big part of why we do Arcadia in the first place is to shine spotlights on other people's creativity. So that's super cool. I'm super interested in that because I know nothing about that part of the world and that mythology. So I'm super interested in that. One question we got a lot of from Arc Revenant, Michael Simmons, among others, is how did you choose which class would go with which season? Why is Wizard winter and why were Warlocks autumn?
So Wizards went to winter because Wizards have to rely on having a rest period to get spells back. And even during their downtime, they have to study. Sorcerer went to summer just because sorcerers feel like such an energetic class. I am rare to see a sorcerer player character who is chill. They are either like very
right.
Yeah, no. It's like, oh my god,
angry.
Spells and charisma? Yeah, I'm either super happy or super excited. Either way, I'm destroying something.
Yeah.
For for bards, their main class feature is Bardic Inspiration, which is just a prepping ability to make someone else do a lot more.
Yep.
And
Makes
Warlock
sense.
went to Autumn just because Warlocks feel like a dangerous class to play. Like, people talk about how cool it is to have like inborn character fluff, inborn lore that you have to play around with. But at the end of the day, you shackle yourself to something very, very monstrous, and there's no way that's not going to have consequences.
Yeah, good point. You know, it's funny when you say it like that, it sounds obvious. Like, I don't know if I would have reached those same conclusions, but hearing you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, that makes that you obviously put a lot of thought into it, and that thought was very high quality. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Pesto Enthusiast says, are there any future projects on your plate that you're excited by?
Yes, quite a bit.
You can talk
working
about, you just had a successful Kickstarter, right? You can talk about that one at least.
Yeah. I just had a successful Kickstarter for a book called Polyhedral, where I made a joke on Twitter, which I've learned not to do, about making a book where I talk to different, where I talk about I'm sick and tired of this. I'm just going to make a book where I just have a sit down talk with other creators about the frustrations of making these large books. And it was a joke, very clearly a joke. I made a bunch of like different responses to myself of just like different scenarios and stuff, and it was a joke. And then all of my peers and friends said, "Yeah, it sounds good. Do it." I'm like, "Please don't do this to me." Don't do this.
Put more on his plate. Put more on his plate.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, like, I've got people I'm interviewing right now for this book. It's just a book of different interviews with different TTRPG designers who've made projects. Some people who make stuff solely on DM's Guild. Some people who have their own companies. I surprisingly got some really popular names on there. Amit Moshe, Matthew Mercer, James Chicasso. I don't know if you know him.
I know, yeah. I like
Hack. Total
What a wanker.
But I'm having fun with that. I'm currently pitching a project to a company right now, and odds are it's going to happen. It's just I'm once again putting myself into making another 300+ page book because apparently I can do nothing else. He said,
well, you did something pretty cool for us. So
book.
Yeah, hopefully,
thank you.
Subclasses of the Seasons was a nice bite-sized break. Although there was a lot of, this is true of all the Arcadia articles, there was a lot of testing Noel Fondoro says, do you have any insight into the balancing of subclasses and their coolness in the early stages of design? Like, were any of the 4 subclasses harder to balance than others? And is even balance the issue? Is it utility? Is it coolness? When the testers give you feedback, what's the first thing they talk about?
Clarity. They wanted to see clarity and wanted me to be aware of any potential game-breaking issues. For the Warlock, for example, there's an ability where if they kill a creature, they can add a flat amount of damage to their attacks. There wasn't a challenge rating gate on there at first. And so one playtester said, hey, with this ability, they could theoretically just shoot a bunch of rats and just have a gun in the game going forward.
Yep.
Just for 10 minutes, they have the Weapon of God, just shooting arrows, but just delivering huge holes in stone walls. For the people who just want to get clarity on like what the Horn Hunter's traps look like.
Oh, sure, yeah.
By and large, clarity and game breaking concerns were the highest things that I saw in my feedback.
Do you ever find it difficult when you get that kind of feedback to figure out how to synthesize what you intended for the ability with how the testers are abusing it? Is that hard or easy or in between?
For me, it was thankfully easy, but I put a lot of that on working with Mackenzie, who has an awareness of D&D mechanics that scares me.
Yeah, she's a pro.
She's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I've said this before, but the only thing that surprised me about Mackenzie getting a gig with Wizards was that they were smart enough to hire her, because she's ace. Did you get any? So now the article has been out for 2 days more or less, and I've seen tons of people online talking about it, and it does seem as though people really like the Warlock subclass. Have you seen any surprising reactions from folks online? Anything that you didn't expect?
There was one person on Twitter who said they were working on their own like Sun Sorcerer bloodline, Sun Magic Sorcerer, and they said, "I'm so glad you made this. You made exactly what I wanted and made it better than I could have." And my thought process was, "Are you sure?" Because I'm primarily focused on narrative stuff. My mechanical design should not be directly looked at.
I don't think that's true, but yeah, I think that's super cool. It's always a really good feeling when you make something that other people go, "Oh, I wanted this, but my version of it wasn't going to be as good," and you're like, "Oh, thank God!" Right? That's always a super good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that was really interesting was, we have subclasses in this issue, and we had the Titan Sorcerer subclass in Arcadia 1, and I would say the tester feedback on Arcadia 1's Titan Sorcerer was very different in that it focused on, at first, that class had a lot of different things that didn't really mesh well together. Like, you could get big, but then you could also hurl these spells, and you could and the testing feedback was always like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this class. It feels like a grab bag of Titan abilities that I don't understand and aren't necessarily Titanous, right? And so a lot of the work that came in from feedback there was like tightening that and focusing that into like, okay, everything should come off this Titan manifestation ability, and then support that and the idea of now you're big and you can wreck house, right? Whereas like Josh had a lot of things thematically already, and that's why I think a lot of the feedback we got there was more like, can we clarify this? Can we make this even clearer what this is, and that kind of thing? So it really does vary kind of depending on where the ideas start to what you get from testers.
Yeah, the testers are really good at at taking, because this is true even of the stuff I write, which James can attest to, that a lot of the, as a designer, when you're writing, you often have this like nebulous cloud of ideas, and the testers kind of force you to coalesce that cloud into something concrete that is a direct through line that is actionable. And that's good. Me as a writer and a designer, like I need that stuff. And when I see that feedback, I'm like, yes, that's true. Let me go fix that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Somebody asked an actual rules question. I don't know that we've actually gotten one of these before, so this is going to be an experiment to see if this is a good idea or a bad idea. But Freezy Pop says about the horned ones. I'm actually glad, Joshua, that you said it out loud, because I was like, is it horned or is it horned? Like Elizabethan pronunciation. We put the accent on the ed. About horned one warlocks, rules as written, Hunter's Mark does not work with Eldritch Blast arrows. Am I correct, assuming the intent is the opposite? Question mark.
Yeah, the intent was that I got asked this question on Twitter and on Reddit. The intent was, yeah, it should apply. It was an oversight, but I also don't know the language to specify specifically Hunter's Mark should apply. So rules as written, no, doesn't apply. Rules as intended, it should apply.
Fair enough. Good answer.
Jeez,
Good answer.
That
And
sounds like
YouTube.
Yeah.
This will be on YouTube, so it's there forever.
Now it's there forever. You're correct. Exactly. Now people know. And actually, I think it was Pesto that ran that question down when somebody asked about it on Reddit. So thanks again, Pesto. Yeah. Joshua, thank you very much for joining us. I believe our time together is, at least for the day, at an end. I thought people asked really good questions, and people really like your article. People really like it.
Yeah,
that's really fun. Absolutely. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah, and I think you'll be seeing lots of folks on Twitter and on social media talking about using these subclasses in their game. So that's, for me at least, I think that's awesome, seeing people use this stuff.
Definitely. And thank you so much. I am excited, Joshua, to see what you roll out next, and what 300-page book comes our way.
Yeah.
And have a good one. And we're going to bring in Hannah now.
Bye, Josh.
Bye. And hello, Hannah.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Hannah? It is awesome to have you here. So you are the editor of the first two and future issues as well of Arcadia. So I wanted to bring you on to sort of, one, introduce you to the MCDM audience and have them ask you questions, but also to let people know sort of a little bit about what you do and how we work together and all that kind of thing. So can you, before we get into that though, sort of take me back on your journey, because you've worked with Wizards of the Coast, and you've worked on some other best-selling D&D supplements as well that have made it big time in the media, made headlines and stuff like that. So yeah, let us know, what is your journey here?
So yeah, I do editing for D&D and sometimes some writing, design, what have you. And actually, my first big editing project that was released was Descent into Avernus for the big Wizards adventure, and I edited a chapter that James wrote, which was a pleasure. Yeah, nasty dungeon, and that was a great start. And I worked with Critical Role on Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which was a fantastic time, which James also worked on.
Right.
And various titles on the DM's Guild, including the College of the Opera, the Cartographer. And these days, I have a bunch of NDA things in the works, but I'm super excited to be able to talk about
Let's talk about them.
Arcadia. Yeah, what do you want
to know? Yes,
I'll
absolutely.
Tell you all I can.
There you go. There's the sum of it right there. So you and I have worked together a lot, which has been really great for me, because you're an excellent editor, and I'm sure a nightmare for you, because I am not. And so,
a pleasure, truly.
But it really has been a lot of fun. And so, bringing you in to work on Arcadia has been great, because we're working on a bunch of different writers' pieces, right? And it's our job to kind of bring those together and have it feel like a cohesive thing, but also it's still a magazine, right? So we're not editing the way you might for a book to have like one consistent voice throughout each article. We still want to preserve the author's voice and what they're trying to say and that sort of thing. So I guess my question for you is, how has Arcadia been different from other things you've worked on, if it has been at all?
working with so many authors is something that's different from many of the projects I've worked on, or at least kind of knowing, what segments an individual person has written. And I really like getting to do that because I get to see from an editor's perspective especially, what the community is doing and what all of these people, some of whom I've worked with before, some of whom I haven't gotten to work with, but whose work I've admired, what they're doing and what their drafts look like and what their ideas are. And I like getting to work on a bunch of different things that's still under the auspices of one project, which helps me be able to kind of manage things mentally. In terms of just process, I will say one thing that's different is getting to go back and forth with James in Google Docs all the time. And he'll wake up and see that I've made changes where it's like 3 a.m. for him. And that I wake up to his comments. And that's different than normally when I'm like tracking changes and leaving notes in Microsoft Word and maybe emailing a file back and forth once or twice. So the collaboration is really wonderful.
Yeah, there's a lot of us telling each other to go to bed and stop working as well because we keep weird hours.
Especially in pandemic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Time has no meaning anymore, so that's a big part of it. One of the things that I really like about working with you is that the first time we worked together on Descent into Avernus, and we should mention it's the Bleeding Citadel chapter, if anyone is interested. There's a dungeon through a giant scab at one point, and it's super gross.
It's awful and wonderful.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on with Hannah. One of the things that was cool was like you afterwards emailed me and said like, hey, did you know there are some things that you do that you could do this way and it would be the right way to do them. You were more polite than that, but I had never from an editor like gotten the like, hey, here's how you can make your job and my job easier and how you can sort of improve your writing in the future. And I also know that you've talked to some of the authors in Arcadia as well, which I think is really great. What is it that like has inspired you to not just edit, but also sort of help elevate the future work of writers?
Well, certainly I'd want to know, right? And especially like I want to know and I want to learn. And I've actually learned things from you, James, where there are like styles where you did in that chapter of Avernus, and I'm like, I know how to do this. I know to mention, if this door or this object might be resistant to poison and psychic damage because that's a thing that you did. And a big part of my editing and my expertise is just learning from a knowledge base and learning from other things I've read, seen, worked on. And that's been true in work I've done in this industry and otherwise. So again, part of it is like, I want to know, I want to learn things. And often when I work with great people who also want to learn things, they appreciate getting some feedback. I try to like offer if you want it. And then of course there's also an aspect of, okay, this makes my job or the job of whoever's editing your work easier next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do, we should sort of, I think it would be helpful for people to break down, right? There's copy editing and there's development editing, and you do both. And I would say even on Arcadia, right? Like, I do a lot of the developing by the time it gets to you, but then you also, when you see things that are like, we might need another little bit of development here, you're also commenting on that, which is, again, super helpful and great and wonderful to have. So could you break down the difference for folks? Like, what is the difference between copy editing and development editing? And what are the skill sets used in each?
I actually break it into 3 categories, which is developmental editing, line editing, and copy editing. And they can bleed into each other a little, certainly. But developmental editing for me is giving feedback on a piece from a game design, narrative, organizational perspective. It's generally higher level feedback that says, okay, this makes sense, but this other part is inconsistent with what it says here. This part doesn't make sense. I don't understand why it would be this way. Or somebody could use this mechanic to do a thing that's not intended. And I would consider that developmental feedback. It's kind of high level stuff that you want to figure out and get out of the way before you get in and start editing sentences. Sometimes you do it concurrently with editing sentences because that's just how it works. But and then line editing is when you really get into the paragraph, sentence, word level, and maybe do a little rearranging, rewording, rewriting to really make things flow well. So sometimes that goes along with developmental editing. Sometimes copy editing becomes more like line editing. But basically, if I'm marking up a document a ton, if I am, if that track changes is full of red or purple or blue pen, that I consider that line editing.
Sure, yeah.
And often on Arcadia, I don't do much of that because James has already gone over it. The authors are great. I am mostly doing copy editing, which is tweaking words here and there, changing small things, punctuation, word choice, game mechanics. So in RPG editing, I would say that the wording of game mechanics falls under line editing. So if somebody says a charisma persuasion saving throw of DC 12, I would go in and say, a successful DC 12 charisma persuasion check.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And so that it actually made me physically ill to hear your first interpretation of that line.
I see people in chat asking about the cat, so I'm gonna hold her up. She's currently licking
Let us
my
see the
hand.
cat. I want to see the cat.
This is May May. She has lots of opinions, and she either helps me edit or traps me at the computer so I can't get up, or pushes the computer off my lap. Don't you?
Look at the kitty. I see kitty paws. Meow.
I need to bring her in frame.
I see little black toe beans.
Adorable.
She has black and pink toe beans.
Look at the kitty. I want to scratch the kitty. Anyway.
Someday when you come to Seattle, you can meet the kitty.
Sorry.
Okay, excuse me, darling.
Cat's like, what is happening?
I'll see if she will settle again and not sit here and yell. Or bite my headphone cord. Oh dear. Okay. I think we've averted disaster.
So for Arcadia, you are editing all kinds of stuff, right? You're doing subclasses, just in one issue, subclasses, creature stat blocks, and an adventure, right? Do you have a favorite thing to edit, or does it more depend on like the specifics of the thing?
It more depends on the specifics of the thing. Sometimes I think, like editing mechanics is easier than editing, paragraphs of prose. And sometimes I think editing paragraphs of prose is easier than editing mechanics. And really, it just depends on the writer and what I get and the I want to say like what state it's in. But so it's all fun. And I like getting to do all of those different kinds of things. If I, was editing just spells all day or just monsters all day, I would get very tired of that. But I get to do different things, and that's great.
Yeah, it's got to be hard, especially with something like Arcadia, to get bored because it's bite-sized chunks of content, and each article is like totally different from the next one.
Yeah, and it's super exciting to see what's coming up. Like James sends me a thing, and I'm like, ooh, here's a Google Doc. Ooh, these are okay. I don't want to spoil the next issue 3, but these are some awesome rules for.
I'm the boss. I can say that.
Yes. These are some awesome rules for aerial combat, like that are cinematic and exciting. And this is I would never have thought of this, and I love it, and I want to use it in our game. And that's wonderful. And I've been excited about that with Arcadia since it was announced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fun. And like that article you're talking about is by an author named Sam Mannell, who's worked with MCDM quite a bit. And his writing style is very different from somebody like Mackenzie, who has also worked with us quite a bit. And it's funny because when I will send stuff to Matt for other projects that doesn't necessarily have a name attached to it, and Matt can tell. He'll say, "Oh, did Sam write this? Did Mackenzie write this?" Right, that sort of thing. So, editing all of those different voices as well, I think, is a big part of your job. How do you copy edit and development edit and work your magic, right, and do your job while also preserving the voice of those authors so well?
It's a lot of instinct, which is a lot of my editing. You know, if I went and picked up a novel, say a fantasy novel, because that's a lot of what I read, and I were to look at that with an editor's brain and say, this sentence could flow better or whatever, that's similar to what I do here. In addition to like bringing things in line with style, I want it to make sense and sound good. And it really comes down to that. And sounding good is more a matter of subjective and of my opinion. Okay, this sounds good to me. And that means that there's no universal, I must make them sound the same. So Mackenzie and Sam are both great writers. I think consciously I wasn't like, okay, I have to treat these differently. It was just looking at the text that's in front of me and saying, what do I need to do to make it sound good and make it clear?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one other thing that I want to ask you, and then we'll throw it over to some chat questions, is before you were editing, you were, and please forgive me because I understand nothing about the field, but you were doing computer programming, right?
Yes.
And so, and I think, especially, technical writing, right, which is what a lot of rule writing and RPG writing can be. I think there's a lot of crossover and overlap between the two. So have you found that what your career before has helped your career now in any way?
There are a couple of ways. Actually, I would say, okay, there are three ways that come to mind. One is that as a freelancer, having been in software and been in tech gives me a lot of confidence in my own worth. I know that my time is valuable and I should negotiate because and that I am worthy of getting good work because I was in an industry where I was very in demand. And so interestingly, that's helped me in this industry, which where it can be hard to make a living as a freelancer. And okay, but when it comes to the work itself, there definitely is a technical mindset, I would say, of systems. One of the things I really like about programming and computer science is how do you take something that's a real world system or something that somebody's imagining it and model it or represent it in a way that is usable and elegant and fairly true to the original. And that's in many ways what game design is all about, right? We don't, especially playing D&D, we don't have systems for, okay, how many times can you hit with a weapon before it breaks? We just want to have fun and play a fantasy game, but we want that to feel realistic enough that it doesn't break our immersion. And consistency is a big part of what I do as an editor, and that's important in software from a doesn't work perspective. Does this function give another function the input it expects? There is a contract between those. And does a user know what to expect when they're using the software? And then the third thing is the learning and collaborative aspect that I touched on earlier. The software world, there are a lot of people who, and a lot of companies too, who recognize the value in making many things open source, in sharing their knowledge and creations with the community and with the industry. And that's something that, again, comes back to Arcadia. How are we bringing together these different people creating different things and showcasing that?
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah, I often think of different RPG rule sets like programming languages, right? And so it's like, okay, well, if you want to work on a supplement for this game, you've got to learn the programming language so that when you write a feat, it plays well with the rest of the system, right?
Exactly. And it needs to use the same wording, or wording that intersects well. My partner and I were just working on this last night, looking at, okay, if a character plays this subclass that we're developing, and a character uses this magic item that we're developing, how do they interact? Is this game breaking? Is this fun? Is this confusing?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Is thinking about all those little pieces, which our playtesters are very good at helping us do as well, which is really excellent. Matt, are there any questions from chat for Hannah?
We just got a great comment from Nice Turtle saying a computer is just a rules lawyer who takes everything written very literally.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in chat who are really actually, like, a light just went on over their head as they thought about how being a programmer would make you a better editor, and how those two things are similar to each other, which I think is fascinating. James, did we get a nerd origin story from Hannah? How did you become? How did you get into the hobby?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been a nerd in a lot of ways for a long time, growing up reading fantasy novels, being interested in math and science, and geology, and all sorts of nerdy things. And when I started dating my partner, right before I graduated from high school, he was like, hey, we met through theater and doing a production of Hamlet. And he was like, hey, you like theater and improv, and you also like math. And like, I play this game with my friends that is like a combination of math and improv, and I think you really like it. And I was like, oh, I know of D&D. I have been interested in playing D&D, but no one had ever invited me to do so before. So I started playing with his group, and that was actually our anniversary is today, so that was almost 9 years ago. And
wow, nice.
Yeah, we've been playing D&D ever since. And then he got into the industry, and when I got tired of beating my head against code all day, I was like, I kind of want to be doing D&D stuff all day.
Right, and so now you beat your head against other authors' words all day.
Yes.
And writing your own. Yes.
Writing my own is, oh god, you beat my head against an empty page all day. But yeah, one of the reasons I really love D&D and role-playing games so much, and feel like this community and this industry is where I belong, is because I can combine all of those different nerdy interests and find people who are interested in all of those different things. It's not just a community of people who are, talking about algorithms or machine learning or organic chemistry, all of which are very cool. But, as a writer and editor and DM, you have to look up knowledge of blacksmithing and deep sea diving and how much blood does the human body contain, and you can use all of those different nerdy interests. And am I going to get our stream flagged by some sort of watch list?
No.
Nah, if Matt hasn't already, you're fine.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, nah. If I haven't got us, yeah. So people had a lot of really good questions. Pesto Enthusiast, who's one of our testers and also one of our mods, says, how long does it take to edit an Arcadia article?
Ooh, good question. I should track my hours and find out. It depends on Jim's like, oh no. I feel I am certain that I am well compensated for the time I put in, but it depends on the article. Let's see. I'm trying to think. The adventures take longer. I think, James, you've mentioned this online, maybe at some point, that we can't do 2 adventures in every issue, maybe not even an adventure in every issue, because adventures take longer to write, they take longer to play test, certainly, and I think they take longer to edit. There's a lot of consistency and a lot of thinking about, okay, if I'm the DM, does this give me the information I need to run this? If I were a player, what would I do here? What would my group do here? And would it be like a significant problem that we should try to anticipate? Stuff like spells, and there's some other stuff with like ancestries coming up. That's usually quicker.
Man, I can't wait for people to see the illustrations for those ancestries too.
Oh, I can't wait to see the illustrations for those.
Oh, really? Well, I can go grab some.
Yeah, I was going to say you.
Oh,
you
actually, no, I can't because I'm not. No, wait, I'm not in charge of the stream. I'd have to use a printer and print it out the most low tech way possible. But trust me, they're really dope. So let's see. We got a bunch of really good questions. So first of all, where did that question go? Doug, whose last name is not applicable, says, how do you advertise yourself as an editor? How do you become known as an editor for hire?
Good question. I am mostly on social media, mainly Twitter, and through that and kind of the network of getting to know people in the industry, I have been, I think, privileged to not have a problem finding work. That's partly a privilege because my partner works in the industry and knows people in the industry, and so I started off being introduced to people like James, and now we work together a bunch. But definitely there is a lot going on in the RPG community on social media, on Twitter and Facebook and Discord, and places like those are great to advertise yourself and to get to know people, to build a brand. I know there's like a Facebook group for DMs Guild creators where people can go and post that they are an editor and they are available for editing work. There's the RPG Writers Workshop, and people there maybe looking for editors or looking to collaborate. So social media and networking.
Yep, networking is huge. Networking is huge.
Yep.
Social media. Thank God for social media, so that you don't have to schlep yourself to a convention, which used to be basically the only way you ever met anybody or networked in this industry.
Frankly, I haven't built a website because I'm like, it'd be good for me to have a website, but I don't need one. I have my Twitter. Yeah.
Websites, email. Come on. What is this? The 1990s? C.A. Berlitz said, I loved seeing Hannah in T-Witches. It was a blast every single time, but Matt Colville doesn't know what T-Witches is.
I think that is referring to D&D Community, which is a monthly tea party talk show that I've done with Lisa Penrose and Celeste Konowich. And we're on a little hiatus right now. Celeste is stepping down as she is very busy. But hopefully we will be back in April, Friday mornings at 11 on once a month, drinking tea and talking about awesome RPG stuff. We try not to self-promote too heavily, but I'm sure I'll talk about Arcadia.
You should self-promote. That's the reason we're doing this, is we want our community, because it's my opinion that the MCDM community, especially on YouTube, is very insular, and they don't know Twitter. They don't know the names of the or the personalities or the faces of the writers or illustrators or editors that we use. And I personally want to feature you folks and your work and your personalities. If you're on Twitter, people should know about this, and the stuff you're working on, people should know about, because I think it makes a better community.
Well, I meant that we try not to promote too heavily as hosts of D&D community or RPG community. Yes, we try to highlight other people's work too, but
I like that. I dig that. Yeah.
I am
Isn't it easier to promote other people's work than your own?
Yes, absolutely. Especially if you could get them to talk about it for you.
Yes. As an editor, so this is a loaded question. This is from Isaiah Nording. What is your opinion on the semicolon? And my follow-up question is, what is your stance on the Oxford comma?
Oxford comma, yes, absolutely, always, no questions. That is my personal opinion and the correct D&D style. When I was in programming, like if I was looking at jobs and there was a company that used technology in a programming language that I like really just didn't want to work in all day, then I was like, I'm not going to work there. If I had to work with a style guide that said no Oxford comma, I would not want to work there.
Wow!
Yeah,
really interesting.
No Oxford comma. I just personally do not want to work with that. It's
okay,
wrong and it's unpleasant.
I will keep my opinions regarding that to myself for the time being. So let me ask. I would like to think I might be the only person that would ask this question of an editor who is also a programmer, and hopefully this question makes sense to you. How many spaces should a tab be?
Honestly, I don't care as long as it's consistent.
Okay, fair enough. Because that is people were talking about holy wars in the chat over Oxford commas and M dashes and semicolons, and that made me think of. I beg your pardon?
Oh, sorry. I interrupted there with an M dash. M dashes are great. I try not to overuse them.
People in chat are saying the correct answer is four spaces is a tab, but that is a famous, and my friend Ray, who is a programmer, says thank you. Yeah, people are don't ask a programmer about that. People who don't know, one of the long-standing holy wars among programmers is how many spaces do you indent when you indent. So when I have another question, I have a lot of questions for the editor. Because one of the things you said earlier was that you read a lot of fantasy novels, and that's one of the things that got you into the hobby. Do you ever read a fantasy novel? You don't have to name names, George R. R. Martin, but do you ever read a fantasy novel and go, "Man, this person needs an editor"?
I try not to get. So I'm not a fiction editor. I have like no training or real experience as a fiction editor. Just my instincts, which is kind of my training and experience for everywhere else too. But I don't, at least at this point in my career, see myself as a fiction editor. And it's certainly much more enjoyable to read work and not think about it from an editing point of view. Honestly, mostly I go, this person needs a proofreader. The publisher done them dirty, and the publisher needed to get them a better proofreader. Because you can tell. You could tell, especially if it gets the paperback version and there are a bunch of typos. Like, why? Why would you not go fix this? So that hurts.
Do you think that as an editor, you notice that stuff more than other people do? Or is it easy for you to kind of put the editor brain down and just consume written content as a consumer?
I think that's sort of just who I am. Whether or not I were an editor and were working as an editor, I would notice those coffee things. And there is a certain point at which I read work where I'm like, I want to read this. I like these ideas. This isn't for a comment, but like, I want to read this. I like these ideas, but it's the grammar is incorrect enough that it is so distracting that I cannot enjoy it. So yeah, someone in chat says, I do pick up on small grammar errors in fiction. That's emixy, but that's really it. That's same here. You notice that, but hopefully you can get immersed in the book.
What this is also a question for me. We've gone over our time. I'm abusing my privilege as the boss. What makes something hard for you to edit?
That is a great question. Things are hard for me to edit when the writer doesn't have what I would call strong prose skills. When the writer has great ideas, but doesn't have a lot of experience making their sentences flow well. And there are a lot of times when that I've come across various writers who will use one word and mean another. And I will have to figure out, okay, I know this is not quite the right word, but what word did you mean to use? And so luckily I have a number of like tools that help me with that now, but it's like, I know this is not quite the right word. It just doesn't sound quite right. I've looked it up. It doesn't mean the right thing, but there's another word that sounds similar that's what they meant to use. What is it? Yeah. And also idioms. Idioms are something I end up working on a lot as an editor. It's like, is this the correct form of the idiom? Is this maybe not the usual, but a cool or interesting new form of the idiom that feels okay?
For people who are not language nerds, what do you mean by an idiom?
Yeah, so an idiom is something that has meaning beyond the literal. Oh, is your phone answering that for me? It has meaning beyond the literal.
Google's like, let me help you with that.
It's specific to the language or culture. So an idiom in English, the famous one might be I couldn't care less, or I could care less, depending on how you want to put it, or the cat's out of the bag, or give someone the sack. All of those are things that if you were not a English speaker in the culture in which those were used, even if you spoke technically perfect English, you would have no idea what they meant. And having them, idioms are something that's sort of evolved naturally out of language, and sometimes people write them with different prepositions, and I try to figure out different words like the cat comes out of the bag. And I'm like, no, the idiom that we know that sounds right to our ears is really the cat is out of the bag.
Yeah. I was because I was the lead writer on 3 video games, I often was also the localization producer, and that is a hysterical job. If you ever want to just laugh your ass off, be a localization producer, because their job is not understanding what the hell you're talking about. Like, I mean, when I say like the people localizing things in other languages are like, why was the cat in a bag? What cat? And you're like, oh yeah. Let me say what this idiomatic phrase means and why we use it, so that you in your foreign language can interpret that, can replace it with your own idiomatic term. And that is often hysterical when I go through and I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. That's not actually, that doesn't mean what it says. Babysitters don't sit on babies. Like, it's hysterical. It's hysterical. It makes you think about your language in a way that you never do normally. We have now gone 8 minutes over. Hannah, thank you very much for joining us. I think people got a huge kick out of having the editor on stream. They asked a bunch of really good questions, and I could tell based on the tone and tenor of chat that they were fascinated to get a look into this, necessary and mechanical, but oftentimes not promoted or talked about part of the process. Thank you very much for joining us and giving our community the opportunity to see what an editor does and how awesome editors are.
Thank you for having me. Genuinely, it's so exciting to be part of the MCDM community and get to engage with people here.
It's awesome.
James, is there anything else we should talk about? Is there, Hannah, do you want to promote anything? How do people find you on Twitter or on social media? Oh, is Hannah gone?
Oh, hey, we're back.
I was like, am I clear? Did we say goodbyes? Farewell.
So yeah, Hannah, if you have anything you want to promote or shout out your social media handles or anything, please do.
Yeah, you can find me on the internets, namely Twitter and Instagram at Wild Rose Mage. I imagine What If the Wonderful Mods may put a link in chat because they're great like that. And I talk about nerd stuff editing. Instagram is especially great if you want to see more pictures of the cat who appeared briefly.
Nice.
She's a little diva, so I promise cat pictures. And that's what I'm about. Let's see, I have some other things announcing soon, and you can find my work on the DMs Guild. I have a link to my portfolio in my pinned tweet.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And check out, Hannah does have some great subclasses on the DMs Guild as well. So all you subclass
I have
fans,
another question to ask.
Yes.
We can't stop yet. I'm in charge. Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but you pitched something for a future Arcadia magazine.
I did, and I just got an email that my pitch was accepted. And
would you like, I would like to hear you pitch your article to chat so that they get some idea of what it's like in this very, very early process, right? Because I literally just read, like, I think it was James summarizing your pitch in like a paragraph.
Oh. Okay, so the first time I played a druid, I want to play every D&D class, and I have now, but it took me a long time to play a druid. And I was like, I love this class. This is so great. I can turn into animals. I can talk with wolves if the DM lets me. But all of the other players were getting cool magic items that were like flavorful and interesting and appropriate and useful. And like the best magic item I could get was like, here's some +1 armor that doesn't do anything when you go into wild shapes. So I was very sad because magic items are fun and cool. And so this has been kind of a passion project for a while now, that I pitched to James as, hey, I actually want to do something with these ideas and publish it and share it with people. A collection of nature-themed magic items, and maybe a handful of accompanying spells for druids, rangers, fey warlocks, other nature-loving characters, to have magic items that are useful for their class, that are fun and flavorful, that are good for druids who aren't just forest-themed druids who are desert or swamp or ocean or tundra. And I'm really excited because I love magic items. I hope other druid players and DMs with druid players and rangers and all of that will get some joy out of these.
So to give people an idea of what the process is like, that's basically like, I mean, I think James just copied your pitch and sent it to me. That's basically exactly what I read. And my feedback, I don't know if you've seen this, but my feedback was, this is for the people in chat who want to know, what is this process like at the most like ground level? My only comment to the pitch was, over a dozen items sounds like a lot. I don't know that we need that many, but if she wants to write them, we'll pay for them. So
it is a lot, but like I said, I want to get things for all the different Circle of the Land druids and all different biomes. And well, if I have things for rangers, then I should really have things for warlocks. So I'm not gonna let scope creep happen too much.
Arcadia should be subtitled "Scope Creep," the magazine, because that's what people want. People don't want short articles. They want scope creep.
They want some beefy ones.
As a huge fan of a game called Star Citizen, I am all about scope creep.
I'm PMing a project right now that, oh my god, so it's wonderful, but the words scope creeper are deeply painful to my soul at the moment.
Yeah,
but I'm very excited.
I don't know if Anna and Lars are listening to this, but right now their ears are probably burning as I'm extolling the virtues of scope creep.
I'll try not to destroy your budget. No, I'm very excited for this. I've had a bunch of ideas already. So yeah, those over a dozen magic items will be coming up.
Pesto Enthusiast asks, who's going to edit your article? Who edits
James
the
and I have already talked about that. Well, James, as the managing editor, will get first crack at it, and I'm sure we'll have some play testers play with the items as well. But we'll be bringing in another wonderful editor that MCDM works with, or one of the wonderful editors that MCDM works with, to be a copy editor on the article.
Yeah, definitely.
Hannah, thank you very much for indulging us and going 15 minutes over time. It was a blast talking to you. This is the first time you and I have met face to face, so to speak. Thank you very much for helping us with Arcadia. You're one of the reasons people love the magazine so much is because of the incredibly high quality of your editing.
Well,
Absolutely.
it's truly an honor, and I love answering questions, talking about D&D, and talking with both of you. So thank you so much, and thanks to all the folks in chat for asking great questions and making me feel good and excited and all of that.
Yay!
Yay! You're awesome. Thank you.
So I think that's it. I think that's the end of the stream.
So there is one other thing, if I may indulge, and I know I'm not the boss.
No,
so
you may not.
But
no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
So the voice of Mackenzie DeArmas is speaking through me, and she did send some notes over on her Elementals article that I just wanted to share real quick. So there were she sort of broke down each of the 4 elementals and talked about people have correctly identified obviously the title, the periodic table of elementals. These are some elementals that are inspired by real world chemistry, right? And so the Kamboro, which is the first sort of explodey metal elemental, that's based on your elements that are like alkali metals, things like potassium, and you can actually go online and watch cool videos of like, look what happens when we touch water to potassium, how it explodes.
Yeah. It's bad. Like that, bad news. Don't do that. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's truly wild. And then the Conducer is based on gold and silver. And what's really cool about that is it has a reaction that lets you basically fling a spell back at somebody that is fired at this this elemental, right? And so that's where that inspiration comes from these conducting metals that can transition energy really well. And then the Electron, they're inspired by halogens, things like fluorine and chlorine, and they can absorb energy from an attack, and then they grow in size because halogens are known for their ability to yank a single electron from another element and add it to their atomic shell and grow, right? So like actually absorbing energy in that way. And so that's the big thing with the Electron. And then the Noxa, which is the one Grace drew that is the big butterfly and everything, those are based on your noble gases. And it turns out that noble gases actually are invisible killers. So things like neon and helium, that sort of thing. Be careful when you're ingesting that helium to make noises with. So that's where Mackenzie drew that inspiration, and she did shout out Grace's art. She said, "I adore that it's shaped like a butterfly. I love my neon death butterflies."
My neon death butterflies. Yeah,
exactly. And then she did go on to just shout out you, Matt, because there's this specific NPC that is tied to the creation of these elementals, right? And the sort of founding to take this chemistry and ground it in fantasy, right? And this was your idea, Matt, was to come up with Ophira Pyatt, who is the person that Mackenzie came up with. But she said like this was actually Matt's idea, and I think that's a good look at kind of the collaborative process, right? Because Mackenzie and I worked on this article and we were like, here it is, what do you think? And you were like, I have one note, and here it is, right?
Yeah, well, I generally like, I think that the people pitching these articles, they have a really cool idea, and I'm sort of the first, you and I are sort of the first people, we're the first audience members to get to see it. And so what I like to do is try to just contextualize it. And that's the idea of saying it would be cool if because these are such a radical idea compared to normal elementals. Normal elementals follow the Platonic idea of earth, air, fire, and water, right? Those guys didn't know about energy shells and electrons and protons and neutrons. It would be cool if we knew who discovered these. And I was like, I don't care if they discovered them or invented them or were the first to summon them, but tying it to a person makes it easier for dungeon masters to use it, because now it's like, yeah, it is different than normal elementals, but that's because of this one person and what they knew or what they figured out or what they discovered. And, I think that stuff helps DMs integrate these things into their game.
Yeah,
Anyway.
absolutely. And I've seen a lot of people online comment about like, yeah, Ophira is cool. It's so great to have this character and everything in here. So that's awesome to have it. And then the reactivity system was another thing that Mackenzie wrote a note about, and just said that for her it was kind of like the logical step, right? If fire is fed by air, what happens when a fire and air elemental get together, right? And you're fighting both of them. They should interact in some way. They should have this reaction. And it was it's sort of, she called it out as the opposite of the Pokemon opposing elements system, right? Like that Pokemon have this thing where like, you know, fire and grass and water, but this is like, hey, what helps each other, right? As really, really fun. And so and then finally called out the grace of or the art of grace, which obviously amazing. And also I did want to throw out that Mackenzie did say that however you pronounce the name of the elementals at your table is correct. So she has her own way of pronouncing them, but if you pronounce them a different way, it's totally fine. So
I actually had trouble in my own head because obviously I want to put a T in the electron at the electron elemental. You want to say electron, right? But it's not an electron. And actually, all that comes electron is just a permutation of the Greek word for amber, because the Greeks knew that if you rubbed amber, it created a charge. And so we grab electron from that. But yeah, it was me. It was only once I figured out, or it occurred to me that you could pronounce it electron, right? Like not putting the emphasis on a different syllable, so to speak. That it became easier for me to say. But yeah, I've already heard different people saying it different ways, which is cool. I have to take a bio break quite urgently, so now is probably a good time to stop.
I think that's perfect. That's all Mackenzie had to say. So thank you all. This was awesome.
And thank you, James, for being a fantastic host, so that all I have to do is sit back and read chat and ask good questions. And thank you to Jerry for making this possible. All this multi-camera, doing different takes, doing transitions, all the little nameplates at the bottom are all Jerry. He's the king of this stuff, and it worked super flawlessly. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Yes, thank you. Amazing work. And thank you, Matt. This is always fun. It's always a blast to chat with you and to chat with all the creators. So thanks.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what happens for issue 3. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on a future live stream. Probably the next time an issue of Arcadia drops, we'll do another one of these with whichever of the creators are available. Until next time, the normal sign off for YouTube is peace out, but the live stream sign off is be seeing you.